As John Phipps told us last week, a byproduct of the ethanol production process is CO2, and that's a good thing for the food and beverage business. But how is it all stored? That's this week's customer support.
Last week, I began an answer to a viewer regarding carbon dioxide emissions from ethanol plants. This week, we'll see what happens once you've captured that stuff. The CO2 is pressurized to about 1,500 psi at 80 degrees, which makes it a fluid that can be readily pumped through pipelines. Underground storage of CO2 is always under an impermeable rock cap, volcanic rock, called basalt. Ideally, they are saline or salty water pools at the injection level that over time will convert the gas to carbonates or chalk. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates 98% of the CO2 will remain trapped for at least 10,000 years. We also have ample storage here in the U.S., about 3 gigatons in known formations. Now, that's mostly in the Gulf region. This works out to be enough to capture all our CO2 emissions, not just ethanol emissions, for about 600 years. While this sounds great, the process of separating and moving the CO2 is a significant expense. The pipelines are relatively safe. CO2 is not combustible like natural gas, but may contain small amounts of hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg smell. Being heavier than air, any CO2 could pool close to the ground if the air is still. This happened in Mississippi last April when dozens were sickened. As for drinking water, the deepest aquifers in use are somewhere around 1,000 feet, although water can be extracted much deeper. To have several layers or one very thick layer of rock cap, injection wells will be 1 to 2 miles deep. That's approximately where oil and gas extraction occur, which creates some of the storage space. The proposed pipeline will have to overcome the considerable infrastructure headaches, notably multiple permits and NIMBYism. Only this time it won't only be not in my backyard, but also not in my back 40. Many landowners balk at any incursion onto their land. They resent neighbors getting a windfall when they don't. They embrace dubious information, or they hold out for the highest possible price. Our tradition and laws of ownership rights, along with politics at every level, make such projects expensive and time-consuming. Capturing and sequestering carbon dioxide is sound science and could be good public policy. However, I think economics will determine if that pipelines happen. In fact, the details of the funding and revenue for this project are questionable, to say the least, and seem to be heavily dependent on federal financing and environmental regulation.
Well, last week, John Phipps talked about autonomy in equipment. But this week, John Deere made a major announcement that takes its See & Spray technology to a whole new level. Details next.